G'day YouTube, Warbles on a lot here with part 4 of the book review, The Biggest Estate on Earth by Bill Gammage. Published by Allen and Unwin, 2011, ISBN 978 1 742 37 7483. Part 1 of the book review, we looked at the landscape templates. Part 2, we looked at the dreaming. Part 3, we looked at the concept of country. Part 4, how was the land managed? For countless generations, people have stared into safe fire. The dancing flames mesmerise, the warm glow is a friend. Not so that other fire, heralded by haze, smoke, red lines in the scrub. That fire is implacable, alive. It roars, races, leaps, kills, devours. On 17 January 2003, a fire burnt over 70% of the ACT. It killed 4 people and destroyed over 500 houses and many public buildings, including ACT Forest Headquarters and Canberra Fire Brigade Station. It ripped trees 70 centimetres across into the air and dumped into a backyard a garden shed complete with tools and shelving from so far away that no one could find where it came from. It killed 95% of wildlife in southwest ACT parks, including over 500 kangaroos and wallabies. It was stopped only by a fire scar left on 24 December 2001. People could not have survived such fires in 1788. Had they faced the Black Saturdays and Ash Wednesdays White Australia has suffered, most must have died. Any uncontrolled fire menaced. A day's fire might eat a year's food. Lats observed of Central Australia, after several very good seasons, the amount of flammable material can build up to such an extent that a single wildfire initiated in the height of summer can sweep over huge areas of the desert, destroying everything in its path. When good rains do not follow these fires, the effect on the flora and fauna and even the soils can be devastating. If this situation had arisen in the past, it is hard to imagine how Aboriginal people could have survived. This situation rarely arose. People had to prevent it or die. They worked hard to make fire malleable and to confine killer fires to legends and cautionary tales. But a great challenge was a great opportunity. Fire could kill, but fire or no fire could distribute plant communities with the precision of a flame edge. Fire could be an ally. Most Europeans had never seen a bushfire until they reached Australia. They thought any fire in the forest that they saw was horrific, and a few of them were, but most of them were not. There are countless accounts of people in the Blue Mountains, off southwest Australia, Hobart in Tasmania, Macquarie Harbour in Tasmania, in New South Wales in the Blue Mountains. Account after account after account of cool mosaic pattern burns which clear all the underbrush, blacken the tree trunks for 15 or 20 feet, but don't actually ignite the canopy. These were completely different fires to the ones that we see these days. Even in summer, Europeans were able to walk behind the fires. A Darling in Peru pioneer noted another remarkable characteristic of the Aborigine, the care taken by them to prevent bushfires. In my long experience, I have never known any serious bushfire caused by the blacks, and the condition of the country, the growth of the trees and bushes such as she oaks, pines and acacias, and a score of other kinds of trees that bushfires always destroy were, when the white man arrived, flourishing in the perfection of beauty and health. Australia in its natural state undoubtedly was liable to the ravages of extensive bushfire, and with so many hostile tribes, it seems as if they would be a frequent occurrence, yet they evidently were not. Controlled fire and its ceremony was 1788's main management tool. Digging sticks were second, dams and canals third. To burn improperly was sinful. Even innocent mistakes might be punished severely, and unleashing uncontrolled fire was a most serious offence. Fire was a totem. Whoever lit it answered to the ancestors for what it did. Understandably, fire was work for senior people, usually men. They were responsible for any fire, even a campfire lit on land in their care. They decided which land would be burnt, when and how, but in deciding obeyed strict protocols with ancestors, neighbours and specialist managers. What must be made absolutely clear, a West Australian researcher concluded, is that the rules for fire and fire use are many and varied, and are dependent upon an intimate knowledge of the physical and spiritual nature of each portion of the land. Without this knowledge, it is impossible to care for country in the appropriate way. An Arnhem Land man explained, "You sing the country before you burn it. In your mind you see the fire, you know where it is going and you know where it will stop. Only then do you light the fire." The first reason to burn was to control fuel. This meant neither today's, quote, "no fuel, no fire," unquote, nor yesterday's, quote, "prevent bushfire," quote. Fuel was a resource. It was managed, not eliminated. People wanted to choose, to plan, to make most fires cool, some hot and some between, for each had its time and use. In a fire-friendly continent this was not easy. Fuel accumulates quickly even in grassland. In 1841-42, Robert Murray wrote that grass fires in Victoria were common during the summer. The flames came on at a slow pace, as the grass happened to be short. The fiery line seldom rose above the fuel on which it fed, and it would have been no difficult matter to have leapt across it. The frequency of these fires is the principal cause of the absence of underwood that renders the forest so pervious in all directions and gives to Australia the park-like appearance which all agree in considering its characteristic feature. All the trees were scarred black, and any shrubs which sprouted were cut down by the next fire. In the next decade, settlers regularly lit fires but let them burn. This was a mistake. On Black Thursday, 6th of February 1851, in conditions very like 7th of February 2009, a fire burnt almost half Victoria. On a suffocating day in a drought summer, hot northerlies linked up small fires in remote bush which had been let burn for months. William Howitt reported 300 miles in extent and at least 150 in breadth was reduced to desert. It was one blackened and burning waste. The country was actually one blaze for thousands of square miles. The inferno fed on crops and hay as well as forest and scrub, but its speed and extent, only a decade or so after the European occupation, shows how readily the bush leaps into deadly flame. This alone was cause to manage every corner of the continent. And here is the tenets of fire management, right? The learning curve. 1. The more fuel is reduced, the more easily fire is controlled, and up to a point the more useful it is. 2. Even hot fires leave unburnt patches, but the cooler the fire, the bigger the patches. 3. Burnt and unburnt patches benefit animals by balancing burnt (feed) and unburnt (shelter country. 4. Patches form mosaics which can be adjusted in size by varying fire intensity. 5. Intensity can be regulated by fire frequency and timing. 6. Frequency and timing are local. They depend on local flora and local moderators like rain, wind, temperature and aspect. 6. The better people understand these variables, the more they can burn with purpose. They can move from limiting fuel to shaping country. 8. This lets them selectively locate fire-tolerant and fire-sensitive plants, situate and shape mosaics and resources conveniently and predictably, and arrange them in sequence so one supplies what another does not. 9. Australia becomes a single estate, varied in means but not ends. 10. Maintaining the estate is enforced by universal law. They talk a whole lot more about cool fires for a couple of pages. Page 164, we get the actual description of how to start, right? Latz explained, in a simplistic sense, all that is required to obtain this mosaic is to burn over as wide an area as possible, as often as possible. To see how this system works, one must take the end of a drought as the starting point. The first good rains will produce little fuel and most fires will only cover small areas. If good seasons continue, fires lit in the second year will extend over greater distances, but will be either halted by the previous year's burnt areas or by natural features such as sandy river beds or rocky hills. The third year is the dangerous period. By this time there is enough accumulated fuel to enable intense fires to spread over large areas and even to enter fire-sensitive communities such as mulga stands. This, of course, will not occur as the fires initiated previously will have reduced the fuel load and provided natural fire breaks. Bracket. Even so, it does appear that Aboriginal people rarely burn during the summer months at this critical period. Close bracket. This system of burning, with minor adjustments in relation to the particular type of country and the time of year, produces a mosaic of plant communities in different stages of fire recovery. Once this mosaic has been initiated, it would be relatively easy to maintain and could be used to protect certain areas from fire for a considerable time. Fire was a life study. Seasons vary. Rain is erratic. Plants have life cycles. Fire has long and short-term effects. People differ on what to favour. How each species responded to fire had to be set against deciding which to locate where. In the centre, old-growth fire-sensitive plants are rare and in poor country, because in good country, fuel builds up and fire kills them. Here was a dilemma. Bracket. Fire kills sensitive species, but no fire lets fuel build up. And a solution. Bracket, locate such species on poor land where less fuel means fewer fires. Close bracket. Many such dilemmas demanded detailed local knowledge, yet in 1788 people shepherded fire around their country, caging, invigorating, locating, smoothing the immense complexity of Australia's plants and animals into such harmony that few newcomers saw any hint of a momentous achievement. Fire managers burnt precisely. They did not light in the wrong directions or with the wrong fuel. They pick the grass and scrunch it up in their hand, and if it gets too powdery, well, it's no more lighting grass. They aimed fires at breaks or patches. If necessary, they put fires out. In the 1870s, people complained to a station manager near Narrandera about his carelessness with fire. When a fire menaced the station while its men were away, an elder studied the flames, then organised women and children to light spot fires in 5 staggered rows across the advancing front. This broke up the fire and it was put out. Above all, managers kept control. Near Western Port Victoria, quote, about 6 p.m. they doused their fire at once, although it must have covered near an acre of ground. In Cambridge Gulf, West Australia, King saw 4 natives seated on the sand watching the progress of a fire they had just kindled, which was rapidly spreading through and consuming the dry and parched up grass that grew scantily upon the face of the island. The fires rapidly spread over the summit of the hills, and at night the whole island was illuminated and presented a grand and imposing appearance. Yet the men who lit it simply sat down. In the central desert, where fires so often seemed big and random, in years of research Gould, quote, never encountered an occasion where a fire actually invaded an area that was already producing wild food crops. And Dick Kimber concludes, quote, large Aboriginal fires were not accidental, random or otherwise uncontrolled. How quickly fuel built up or what balance people wanted could be decisive, for quite small differences in frequency and intensity might reset the ratio of ground, mid-story and canopy plants and the animals in them. Broadly, the faster growing and more fire welcoming the dominant plant, the more frequent the fire. In fire-prone communities, a fire a day kept bushfires away, while protective burns ringed fire-sensitive places. Northern grassland was burnt annually, kangaroo grass every 2 or 3 years, mulga at most once a decade, dry ridges perhaps every 15 or 25 years, tuart every 2 to 4 years, and jarrah every 3 to 4 in early summer, karri about every 5 years in late summer. Mountain ash needs fire every 400 years or so, yet it is the most flammable eucalypt. Whole forests rage with a ferocity none can fight and few survive. Almost certainly people managed mountain ash in winter. They lived on the coast in summer. Perhaps for generations they winter burnt to keep edges back and clearings open, sensibly beginning when a forest was young. Yet a winter cool burn could not ensure enough heat for those wet forests to kill and replace themselves. That needs a dry summer. Yet it was done. It must have been a time for brave men, their families safely on the coast. Burning whenever possible is too often for many plants and animals. Max Lyons learnt near Alice Springs. Sometimes you burn at the wrong time and it's too bloody hot. It scalds everything and it takes a couple of years to come back. Fuel rationing and timing kept most fires cool. Cool fires could burn one species without much harming another. Speed regrowth, let people hunt close up, and stop or cage random fire. Sometimes people had to work to keep the fires going, but they were precise and malleable. North of Cairns, rainforest people combined timing and precision. You burn in the Ballure, cold time. Inside the old scrub is still damp, wet. It won't go into the scrub, you just sort of burn the edge with the dry. That's how we save the scrub. Fire only followed the kangaroo grass right on the edge, doesn't go far into the scrub. Precision burning exposed animal tracks, protected yams on forest margins, and shielded forest from dry season hot fires. When the wind was right, people burnt inside the forest gently to reduce surface litter, more intensely to make clearings and tracks. Scott makes clear how crucial timing was. Whereas fuel control was a fire plan's baseline, timing was its end point, considering both fuel and purpose. Particular animal and plant communities needed and got very precise fire timings and intensity. Trickling cool fires and clearing hot fires were timed to keep species in balance. On dry Sydney sandstone, people burnt cool fires in spring but hot fires in early summer to open hard seed pods or germinate legumes. In North Queensland, early dry fires promote some shrubs and grasses, late dry fires promote others and herbs. When to burn grass might hinge on its varying growth from year to year or on associated tubers or annuals, some killed by fire, others needing it to flower, seed or compete. These needs are easily unbalanced. For example, badly timed fire promotes unpalatable perennials like bladygrass or bunch speargrass at the expense of foddergrass, and has let spinifex extend its range to become the most common organism in the dry 3/5 of Australia. Yet plant communities embracing different fire responses thrived in 1788. Multiply this by Australia's 25,000 species and a management regime of breathtaking complexity emerges. Situating plants, located grazing animals and their predators as precisely as a farmer with paddocks. The burning of a country was not at all random, Kimber observed. There was greater attention to areas favoured by certain nutritious or otherwise useful plants and to areas favoured by certain animals. Knowledge of the locality of previously burnt areas clearly aided men in their hunting and also resulted in greater focusing of animals than if lightning-induced fires spread fiercely, wildly and unpredictably. Many animals depend on specific and unnatural fire. The Chukirpa dreaming shows Angu how animals will be with fire and burnt country. For example, some dragon lizards and other small animals don't like the ground after it's been burnt. They go away for a while and then come back when the spinifex has grown again. Some animals, such as the spinifex hopping mouse, like it both ways. They move into the burned areas to feed and then return to safety in the large unburnt spinifex hummocks where they have their burrows. Kalia and Malu, emu and kangaroo, do not like freshly burnt country, but come back to it after rain has put on the green feed. Most animals and birds love the green feed near water. Mallee fowl survive only small patchy fires, frequency depending on terrain. So people burnt often enough to limit fuel, but carefully enough to let the birds flourish. Gliders and possums like frequent fire, but rat kangaroos need casuarinas burnt about every 7 years. A native mouse needs heath burnt every 8 to 10. Mainland Tamar wallabies need dense melaleuca burnt very hot every 25 to 30. In the centre, when the little emus are on the ground, about August, you do not burn. Small desert marsupials need mature spinifex for shelter, beside young spinifex to eat, which cool fire makes. But in West Australian heath, cool fire is associated with an alarming decline of both the lowland grass wren, apparently by depleting its food, and Cayley's grevillea because patches attract small mammals which eat out its seed. All these plants and animals thrived in 1788, making clear that people timed a great variety of local and specific fires over many centuries. Most Australia was burnt about every 1 to 5 years depending on local conditions and purposes, and on most days people probably burnt somewhere. Not from the book but from my head, what this means is that the current practice of trying to confine your bushfire management to 1 or 2 weekends per month for 2 or 3 months per year is never going to come near to doing the job. Back to the book. On the Lachlan, Oxley saw frequent winter fires, and on the Maranoa, Mitchell explained that in winter the natives availed themselves of a hot wind to burn as much as they could of the old grass, and a prickly weed which was being removed would admit the growth of a new crop on which the kangaroos come to feed and are then more easily got at. In South Australia's winter, Johannes Menge saw plains exactly like the parks I saw in London, the old grass having been burnt by the natives and the new grass having grown a foot high. An emerald colour out of the black gave the eyes a delightful impression. The grass is everywhere 5 feet when not burned and bears a corn like barley. Northwest of Uldea, South Australia, William Murray saw winter fires promote both scrub and grass. Sandhills to the west, which are very high, have had large areas burnt, and there is very plentiful young bush feed and some fair grassy patches. The fires bring up a lot of young acacia, and the patches which have been burnt are always much better feed than the older scrub. Only cool winter fires make the feed. Shelter mosaics, essential for western hair wallabies, now close to extinction. While McDougall, Stewart, Giles and Dave Lindsay all saw grass springing from autumn to spring fires, apparently where Spinifex is now, suggesting that fires today may be too hot. Even at the wrong time, country needing fire must be burnt. You got to burn, an elder declared. You don't burn, then the country will get poor. It'll shut itself up. No good for anybody then. A bad fire was better than no fire, for no fire let fuel build up, making a bad fire worse. Good things came from fire. It made the land comfortable, comforting, bountiful and beautiful. Yibar Buck declared, the secret of fire in our traditional knowledge is that it is a thing that brings the land alive again. When we do the burning, the whole land comes alive again. It is reborn. Ida Ninga Ninga called, oh, all of the islands, they would once be burning from north, south, east and west. They would be burning. The smoke would be rising upwards for days. Oh, it was good. You knew where all the families were. It was really good in the times when the old people were alive. Words embraced fire. Darling people use the same word for flame, open country, and flame whereby open country is made. Yan Yua say Ngaraki, badly burnt country. Warraman, well burnt country, good to hunt on. This is a test. Ramal Marenjara, lighting small fires in a row to burn a beachfront or a large plain. West Arnhem landers say Anbirlu Yarwarad for low creeping fires. Ari Warralurge, cleaning the country. Warraga, burnt ground. And gold, green pick. Matu speak of Narayurnma, freshly burnt area. Waru Waru, green shoot stage. Murika, mid stage. Mangal, mature spinifex. Kanaraka, old spinifex, dying in the centre. That's the upload limit, I think, so I'll come back to this. Ciao.